Oral questions. Question orale, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Au nom de l'opposition officielle,
on behalf of the official opposition, I would like to add my name to all those who are offering condolences to the family of Jim Carr and to the Liberal caucus and all his friends. Our thoughts and prayers are with you in this time of mourning.
Monsieur le Président, le Premier ministre a nié.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister said that he does not want to ban hunting weapons, but now Liberal members, public servants, and Indigenous groups are saying that the list does include a large number of hunting weapons that are entirely appropriate for civilian use. When will this government target real criminals and put more resources at our border and do something about the real criminals instead of attacking hunters who are simply doing their work legally? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to start by thanking my colleague and all colleagues who have expressed all of the sorrow and empathy that they feel due to the death of our friend, the Honourable Jim Carr. I know tomorrow we'll have more time to discuss that at length. I really want people to remember that he was an exceptional man and parliamentarian.
To community, to region, to country, his devotion to the idea of a Canada that was even better, where everyone came together to build a strong future, his passion, his thoughtfulness, his commitment to the prairies, his commitment to Canada will be long remembered and needs inspire us all every single day as we notice the empty seat amongst us. Merci.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the government has the wrong target when it comes to public safety. They're banning hundreds, in fact, we don't know exactly how many because their officials can't tell us, of lawful, previously legal hunting rifles and shotguns that are used by First Nations, by farmers, and by rural people right across the country. Meanwhile, last week, a man who was convicted of second-degree murder had been released early and is now rearrested for 51 counts of trafficking firearms. Why won't they go after this criminal and others like him instead of targeting Grandpa Joe's hunting rifle in Cape Breton?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are united around the need to see our communities safer, and most Canadians understand that that means eliminating the guns that are most dangerous, those guns that are designed to kill the largest number of people in the shortest amount of time. That's why 2 years ago we moved forward with a ban on assault-style weapons, but we also know that we need to ensure that that ban stays in place, and that's why we're moving forward with a definition to define assault-style weapons. We will continue to consult with Canadians and all parliamentarians to ensure that we're capturing the right weapons, but we will, Mr. Speaker, keep Canadians safe.
Leader of the Opposition.
Only he's not capturing the right weapons, according to his very own Liberal MP for the Yukon, who said this is really upsetting. Many Yukoners regularly hunt either as a food source or for recreational aspects of hunting. I'm not happy with this bill. Other Liberal MPs have said likewise, and the Prime Minister's own public servants have testified that hunting rifles will be banned under his proposed amendment. Now that he's been caught with his real agenda, which is to go after hunters and farmers rather than gun smugglers and gangsters, will he reverse himself and promise never again to go after our hunters in this country?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
While Conservative politicians continue to fearmonger and share disinformation, we're doing the work necessary to keep Canadians safe. We will continue to consult on the list because, yes, we are not interested in going after guns that are typically used for hunting and protecting farms. We're going to continue to make sure that we're banning the most dangerous weapons that were designed to kill people in the shortest amount of time. That is something, unfortunately, the Conservatives want to make legal assault-style weapons again, Mr. Speaker, and that's why they're in the pockets of the gun lobby, and that's why we're standing strong.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, you know, we all wondered how it was possible for this government to build up a 2.2 million person backlog in the immigration system. And now we found a clue. There are 60,000 people whose cases have been handed over to employees that no longer work for the government. You can just imagine someone calling up and saying, I'd like to speak to Jack. He's my case officer. I've been waiting for my immigration. And they say, oh, Jack hasn't been here in 10 years. Well, no wonder things are delayed for so long. These are people who are separated from their families, refugees who need to get here quickly for their safety. How could the government have been so careless?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, we continue to grow our immigration system. We continue to transform it and modernize it so that it's able to respond to the needs of Canadians, of people who want to become Canadians and contribute to our society. That's why we're investing in our system to provide a modern client experience and more efficient immigration system. And modernizing our immigration system is about putting people at the heart of everything we do, and we will continue to be there and resolve any technical issues.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, from incompetence to bad ethics, we have another Liberal minister found guilty of violating the Ethics Act, this time for giving a $23,000 contract to one of her best friends at a company called Pomp and Circumstances. And it reminds us of the Prime Minister giving $500 million to an organization called the We Charity that gave his family $500,000. So, Mr. Speaker, will this minister be held accountable, and will she be required to pay back the $23,000 in improper contracting that she gave out?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in this House there's a lot of debate and back and forth, but every now and then there's an opportunity for Canadians to weigh in directly on what's going on in federal politics. And yesterday, the residents of Mississauga Lakeshore had a choice. They could choose between the Conservative Party's politics of division and reckless proposals that included recommending you opt out of inflation by investing in crypto, or our government's approach of being there for Canadians every step of the way and putting more money back in their pockets. Well, Mr. Speaker, the people of Mississauga Lakeshore have spoken and elected a Liberal member of Parliament to come to Ottawa.
L'Honourable Député de Belleuil.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Bloc Québécois, I would also like to present our sincere condolences to the family of the former minister and member, Jim Carr. 112,000. That's the number of immigrants that the Prime Minister thinks Canada should receive, or that Quebec should receive, and that there are only a small number of francophones in Quebec compared to the number of anglophones on the entire continent. And yet this Prime Minister is so incapable of handling the immigration file that he has given 60,000 cases to people who aren't working anymore. So perhaps he should let Quebec manage immigration as well as French. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, what I raised is that Quebec has the capacity to raise its immigration threshold if it wishes. That's a decision that we respect for Quebec, and we respect its jurisdiction there and throughout our system of government. We will always work with the government of Quebec and other governments throughout the country to protect French and to welcome Francophone immigrants. There is a lot of work still to do, but we will continue to do so. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Well, Mr. Speaker, over 24 hours, the Prime Minister has said that Quebec needs to receive 112,000 immigrants. He says he's not imposing that, but clearly he would like to. And now, a former member has said that we need to block Bill 96 because the federal government doesn't seem to want to respect Quebec's jurisdictions. And yet, it is forgetting about the many irregular entrants at Roxham Road who are difficult to integrate into the Francisization system, and he's also blocking Francophone African students from coming to Quebec. Should he finally realize, is he finally going to realize that Quebec should be responsible for these files? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, that's exactly what I did. I did not propose a number for Quebec. I simply recognize that Quebec has the capacity to increase its immigration thresholds, should it so desire to do. We recognize the importance of Quebec in preserving the Quebec nation and the French language, and that is why we will continue to work closely and respectfully with the government of Quebec. And yes, we will mention it when we feel that the preemptive use of the notwithstanding clause is something that the federal government should not sanction.
On behalf of all New Democrats, I want to extend our condolences to the friends and family of Jim Carr on his passing. On est dans une crise de santé.
We are in a pediatric health crisis. At the Saint-Justine Hospital in Montreal, health workers have said they have never seen anything like it. The wait times, sick children, frustrated parents, and desperate healthcare workers. And this Prime Minister is showing a lack of leadership. When will he finally show some leadership? Meet with the provincial and territorial premiers and find solutions. The Right Honourable Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, for months I've been meeting regularly with premiers. Our ministers are studying this issue because we recognize that Canadians need a better healthcare system. They need GPs. They need shorter wait lists. They need better mental health care. Rather than do what the leader of the NDP is proposing, send a blank check to the provinces, we will instead require results for Canadians. We need results for families, seniors, and youth.
Honorable député de Burnaby Sud.
The Red Cross had to be called in to the Ottawa Children's Hospital. There's a trailer set up at a children's hospital in Calgary because the parents and children are in such high demand for services that they have to wait out in the cold, so they have a trailer. Children are dying from respiratory illness, and this is just the beginning of the season. And in Montreal, workers are saying this is the worst they've ever seen. And we have a Prime Minister who's not showing up to provide solutions. So when will the Prime Minister work with the premiers, meet with them, and find solutions instead of excuses to deal with this crisis?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Not only have I been speaking regularly with premiers, not only have our health ministers and other ministers been engaging directly with their counterparts across the country, but I've been sitting down with doctors and nurses and other frontline workers who've said very clearly, do not just send more blank checks to the provinces for healthcare. Make sure that the provinces are delivering outcomes, delivering results for families, for seniors, for young people. The opposition parties may call for just more cash to be flushed to the provinces. We're going to need to get results from the provinces for Canadians, not for us, for Canadians who need better health care, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Calgary, Forest Lawn.
This holiday season will have a lot less cheer as everything seems like it's broken in Canada. Half of Canadians are worried about putting food on their table because of Liberals' reckless inflationary spending. A third of Canadians can't afford homes because out-of-control Liberal spending has forced the Bank of Canada to increase its interest rates for the 7th consecutive time this year. And a quarter of Canadians will need to access charity services. And the Liberals' solution to that is to pile drive even more taxes onto Canadians. Why won't these Liberals stop forcing their failed tax and spend agenda on Canadians so they can afford to eat and heat their homes?
The Honourable Minister for Tourism.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable member for the question, and before answering, I would just like to state, Mr. Speaker, the deep sadness that we are all feeling at the passing of our friend and colleague, the Honourable Jim Carr. Jim was a tireless representative, a true defender of his constituency, his city, the Prairie West, and all of Canada. He was my mentor and my friend. He will be dearly missed. All members of this government share his deep and abiding passion for providing for Canadians in their time of need, for sticking up for them during the pandemic, and for facing these economic headwinds together.
The Honourable Member for Calgary, Forest Lawn.
Our hearts and prayers are also with Jim Carr's family and friends. Now, Liberals insiders are the only ones benefiting from reckless Liberal spending. And the Liberal Trade Minister's friend is the perfect example. She just got caught breaking ethics laws for giving her friend a lucrative contract. This kind of wasteful spending is driving more and more Canadians into food banks. For every hard-earned dollar Canadians make, they owe $1.83. Failed Liberal policies have driven up the cost of home heating and made them double. Why won't this Liberal government do the right thing, stop their reckless spending, rein in their spending, cancel a carbon tax so Canadians can keep the heat on this winter?
The Honourable Minister for Families.
Mr. Speaker, what the honourable colleague is talking about is the Canada Child Benefit that's helping 9 out of 10 Canadian families. It's helping that single mom pay for groceries. It's helping that family make sure their kids have access to winter clothing. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we will continue to support Canadians as they go through difficult economic times. The Conservatives keep talking about how things are more expensive, but when they have an opportunity to actually vote on items that help Canadians, they vote against them every time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Speaker, $1.83. Canadian households now owe $1.83 for every dollar of disposable income they have. That's what Stats Canada says. The amount that Canadians owe got higher while the value of their assets declined. And with the bank's 7th consecutive rate hike this year, even the bank governor said that deficits are increasing inflation. That in turn leads to those higher interest rates. So now Canadians are stuck with the biggest bills they've ever seen. The more this government spends, the more things cost. So when will the Liberals stop making Canadians pay for their wasteful spending?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, throughout the fall, we have put in place various measures to help Canadians with the cost of living, and each step of the way, we invited Conservative members of this House to vote with us and to vote with Canadians. Mr. Speaker, let's take a look at the record. We will eliminate interest on federal student apprentice loans, speed up the Canada Workers' Benefit, do a $500 top-up, provide dental care to kids, make housing more affordable. On each of those measures, Mr. Speaker, how did the Conservatives vote? They voted against.
For Thornhill.
Speaker, will continue to vote against the hundreds of thousands of dollars they gave to anti-Semites, the $58 million that they wasted on an app that didn't work, the $1.6 billion for people that quit their jobs during the pandemic, the more than $6 million for people that were in jail, the more than $1 million to dead people. The only people doing well are these are friends of these Liberals. Mr. Speaker, we will oppose the incompetence, but the better question is why doesn't he?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Speaker, we can observe a fundamental ideological divide between His Majesty's loyal opposition and the governing side of this chamber. On this side of the House, we believe that to support people in need, we can advance programs that actually provide direct help to them. The Conservative solution to an affordability crisis is to do less to help families in need. This should come as no surprise. This has been their approach since 2015. When we cut taxes on the middle class and raised them on the 1%, the Conservatives voted against. When we stopped sending child care checks to millionaires to put more money in the pockets of 9 out of 10 Canadian families, the Conservatives voted against. When we had programs that kept food on the table and roofs over families' heads in my community, they held a press conference that said they would never support those programs.
The Honourable Member for Cumberland Colchester.
Well, Mr. Speaker, what we won't support is the waste of this Liberal government. We know that Atlantic Canadians are suffering. They're going to pay $7,000 more this year to heat their homes. And the Liberal carbon tax plan is only going to make it worse. The government of Nova Scotia released its own plan this week, which will reduce emissions by 53% over the next several years. This goes well beyond the plan of this Liberal government, which we know continues to fail to meet emissions targets. Will this Liberal government stop forcing their failed carbon tax plan on Atlantic Canadians?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister for Federal Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I love to get up and talk about Atlantic Canadian, where I'm from, because I'm so proud when my honourable colleague behind me was in Halifax, and in his riding we announced a $5,000 grant for Canadians, and Atlantic Canadians especially, to get off oil heat. That's going to help many people in Atlantic Canada and people in my riding of the Long Range Mountains. It's a grant to get off oil, which is what we all need to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Cumberland Colchester.
Well, Mr. Speaker, obviously the government of Nova Scotia doesn't agree. The PC party has put out a no carbon tax for Nova Scotians petition out there for people to sign because of this government plan. They clearly realize that the plan continues to fail over and over and over again. With the punishing carbon tax, Nova Scotians are going to pay $2,200 more in 2025 and $3,100 more by 2030. When will this failing Liberal government stop punishing and crushing Atlantic Canadians with the carbon tax?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Mr. Speaker, with due respect to my honourable colleague, his mathematics are simply off. He ignores the fact that the program has been designed to put more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 families than any fuel charge would cost them. In addition, we've created a new $5,000 grant program, which is going to help people in my community transition from home oil heating to heat pumps, which is going to potentially save them thousands of dollars a year. Every step of the way, we've been focused on developing programs to put more money in the pockets of families in need, whether it's seniors, students, workers, or households. We're going to continue to be there for people in their time of need. I would beg the Conservatives for once to join us in supporting ordinary families.
Honorable député de Jonquière.
The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Mr. Speaker, it's like Groundhog Day. Once again, on Friday, all the premiers of Quebec and the provinces have asked to meet with the Prime Minister about an increase in the health transfers. 27 months ago, they came up with a number for their needs, and they've been demanding a meeting. 27 months that the Prime Minister has spent ignoring them, 27 months where our hospital's level of care keeps going down, and ultimately the Prime Minister is doing this to the detriment of people who are ill and our healthcare professionals. Will he finally meet with the premiers? The Honourable Minister of Health. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for raising the fact that things are very difficult for patients and healthcare workers throughout the country, including in Quebec. That's been going on for months. The situation was exacerbated by COVID-19, but the demographic pressures have been there for some time. And as time continues to pass, we will see demands on the system increase. That's why we need to do things differently. Sending unconditional transfers to the provinces is not a good plan. The Honourable Member, Mr. Speaker, enough analysis. We need results. And we can't get them while Ottawa continues to hold on to the money. The real reason for this impasse is that federal does not want to pay 35% of health costs. It wants to drive a wedge between the provinces and instead negotiate individual discount agreements in order to invest less. Meanwhile, in hospitals, we are piling people onto stretchers because there aren't enough beds. Children are having to travel 500 kilometers to get care. Does my colleague really think that this is the time to engineer little plots to invest less in health? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, investing in health is exactly what we've been doing for several years with COVID-19. $72 billion additional dollars. And more recently, $2 billion more dollars to reduce surgery and health care delays, another $9 billion for home care, mental health care, and long-term care. And of course, there will be more. But we've already spent a great deal, and we need to do things differently in order to improve care for Canadians and Quebecers. The Honourable Member for Montcalm. Well, Mr. Speaker, while the Prime Minister continues to show stubbornness and refuse to meet with his counterparts, 784,000 people are waiting to see a specialist. 160,000 are waiting for surgery. That's nearly 1 million Quebecers who need health care, but who are not getting it because of a lack of resources. Can the Prime Minister explain to those Quebecers, 1 million of them, why he won't even meet with his counterparts in order to discuss the health transfers? The Honourable Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs. Mr. Speaker, my colleague heard the Health Minister's answer about the major investments this government made in the health system. And good news, as you know, Mr. Speaker, we are going to make further investments throughout Canada. We recognize that Canadians are concerned about the public health care system. We are continuing to hold discussions at multiple levels with the provinces and territories. We will look for an agreement on further funding that will lead to actual results, as Canadians expect.
Member for Edmonton Mill Woods.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberal-created immigration application backlog is at over 2 million applications. People waiting to reunite with family, their spouses, children, parents, waiting for work permits, waiting for health care. And now we find out that tens of thousands of these applications were actually sent to immigration officers that don't even exist. These are people that haven't worked for Immigration Canada in years. So these applications are just sitting there. Nobody's been working on them. Mr. Speaker, who's going to explain this incompetence and apologize and fix this mess?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Speaker, I'd like to offer clarity to those families who are seeking to be reunited and those workers who are seeking economic opportunity in Canada. We are going to process every case in our inventory. With respect to the honourable member's allegation, I can reassure people that the issue of codes for inactive employees is simply a reflection of the way we manage the inventory. Every single case is attached to a code that has been sent to a relative processing facility. Mr. Speaker, while I'm on my feet, I'm pleased to share that earlier this month, we have set a record for the largest number of newcomers ever settled in Canada. This is good news for Canada, good news for our economy, and great news for our communities.
The member for Edmonton Mill Woods.
Mr. Speaker, there's another example of how Canadians are having to pay for their incompetence, their mistakes, their mismanagement. To them, it's just codes, but these are real families behind these applications, people waiting to reunite with loved ones, waiting for health care, and yet they're making more announcements. So you can tell me, please, I'm asking them now, how are they going to fix this mess of all these applications that have just been sitting there while people are waiting for their lives to continue? Who's going to apologize for these applications?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
The honourable member's allegation that files are resting with officers who do not exist is unequivocally false. We will process every one of those applications. I'm pleased to share, Mr. Speaker, that as a result of the investments we've made to hire more than 1,250 people, to embrace technological solutions, and to relax administrative procedures, we have in the last few months alone reduced the number of cases in our inventory by more than 300,000. That's more than 300,000 people in the last few months that are now reunited with families, that are here making a difference in our communities, helping support our local economy. We are the party that's going to continue to support newcomers because we believe it serves the national interest and it's the right thing to do.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Immigration transferred more than 59,000 immigration files to 779 former employees who are inactive, and some of them haven't even worked for the department since 2006. The worst part of this entire matter is that it seems like no one on the Liberal side seems to care. Even the minister doesn't seem to think it's serious. Will the minister apologize to the thousands of family who are waiting for their turn?
L'Honorable Ministre.
Speaker, the honourable colleague suggests the minister doesn't think it's serious. The minister doesn't think it's true. The allegation that they are making on the floor of the House of Commons simply belies the facts of the situation. When officers leave IRCC, we maintain their codes so we can trace who touched employees' files. It's a responsible thing to do, and we convert the purpose of those codes to make sure that the files actually go to where they are going to be processed. We're going to continue to do what we can to reduce the number of cases in our inventory. We've seen immense progress, reducing it by more than 300,000 in the last few months alone, and just this month we have set a record for the largest number of newcomers ever resettled in this country, and that's a positive thing.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. If I've understood correctly, Mr. Speaker, the minister seems to be saying that CBC is promoting fake news, because this week we talked about 59,000 files transferred to these employees that are no longer there, and also CBC also warned that there were issues, and they said they've never heard about anything. And then at the Mender's office, there are many requests. People don't know what's happening. The Department of Immigration is not on the right track. Can the minister apologize, or at least say he is sorry to those who are waiting, who have been waiting for years, many of them? The Honourable Minister.
Every person who's got an application in the system, that they can expect their case to be processed in accordance with the laws of Canada. I can thank the honourable colleagues of this House who've actually supported some of the measures that boosted the funding available to process cases more quickly, because it's having a serious and positive impact. This month we have set the record for the largest number of newcomers ever settled in this country. Over the past few months we have reduced the number of cases in our backlogs by more than 300,000. We are back to the service standard we enjoyed before the pandemic for study permits already. Early in the year, we will achieve the same for work permits. We are on the right track. We're going to continue to make the necessary investments to get people into our communities, because it's good for our communities and good for Canada.
The Honourable Member for London Fanshawe.
Today, the Minister for National Defence tabled her response to the Arbour report. Women in the armed forces who have faced years of misogyny and sexual misconduct have heard it before, that there's a plan and that change is coming. Justice Arbour did the work. She reviewed thousands of documents and did hundreds of interviews to come up with her 48 recommendations, but now fears the government response today missed the mark. Today's response has more reviews, more studies, and more delays. After ignoring so many reports and recommendations, why should the service members believe that this time will be different?
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, this time is different. It is my intention and the Department of National Defence's intention to implement all 48 recommendations of the Arbour report. In fact, we've already begun to do that, Mr. Speaker, and we will continue until it gets done. We are putting our shoulders to the wheel. This is important for moral reasons as well as operational reasons as we continue to grow the Canadian Armed Forces, where every member feels protected and respected when they put on a uniform for this country. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Vancouver East.
The Minister says assigning immigration applications to agents that are no longer working at IRCC is ordinary process and part of the inventory management. That means the Liberals are deliberately assigning applications to officers knowing that they don't work there anymore. So close to 60,000 applicants have been in a state of limbo, some for as long as 15 years, unable to move forward with their lives. So what does the Minister have to say to the families whose lives are being destroyed when their lives are deliberately sent to oblivion for processing?
The Honourable Minister for Immigration.
Mr. Speaker, as always, I thank my honourable colleague for her question and her concern for the well-being of newcomers and people seeking to access the Canadian immigration system. But it's very important that we provide clarity to those families who are seeking to be reunited, as well as the workers seeking to improve their economic outlook by coming to take opportunities in Canada. There are applications that were tied to officers who no longer work for our department. We maintain the code of those officers in order to trace the cases, but when those workers leave IRCC, we convert that code into a manner that allows us to send those cases to the location where they can be most effectively processed. This is a strategy we use to make sure we can process files quickly, and I want to reassure people every file will be processed.
The Honourable Member for Don Valley East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last Friday, in partnership with the Province of Ontario and the City of Toronto, the federal government announced a combined investment of $1.5 billion for the TTC's Bloor-Yonge Station expansion and rehabilitation project. Can the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, Infrastructure and Communities please update this House on the improvements we will see at the station and the importance of making transit more accessible and reliable for all Canadians?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think all members recognize the extraordinary work done by our colleague in Toronto. Mr. Speaker, when transit is accessible and easy to use and on time, more Canadians will use it. The investments our government is making in transit are making it more reliable, safer to use, and will be able to keep up with the increased ridership and population over time. That's why I was happy to announce the $1.5 billion Bloor-Yonge Subway Improvement Project that will provide Toronto residents with access to safe, fully accessible, and modern stations that are equipped to handle increased ridership. Mr. Speaker, I know how excited you are about this very project.
The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, a young man was caught with a prohibited weapon loaded with 72 rounds of ammunition that was spared jail time thanks to a Liberal law supported by the Bloc and the NDP. There is no longer a minimal sentence for this type of crime in Canada. On the one hand, we let criminals roam free, and on the other hand, the government wants to penalize honest gun owners with Bill C-21, a double standard. Could the Liberals go after the real criminals and leave the hunters alone? The Honourable Minister of Justice. Mr. Speaker, the security of our communities is obviously a priority. We've always said that serious crimes will have serious consequences, but we also know that our system, it needs reform. With C-5, we've left aside unnecessarily severe policies, particularly those who penalize blacks and marginalized peoples. The old system wasn't working. Mr. Speaker, we're proud of the adoption of C5 and on the effects it will have on Canadians.
In St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, in Quebec, a man who was convicted of drug trafficking and possession of illegal weapons avoided prison time thanks to the Liberals' new law abolishing minimum sentences for certain gun crimes. On the one hand, we have the Liberals letting dangerous criminals run free, and on the other hand, we have the Prime Minister going after hunters and farmers. When will the Prime Minister stop attacking hunters and farmers and deal with the real problem of criminals smuggling drugs and guns? When, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Minister of Justice. Mr. Speaker, we all want a society that is safer, where serious crimes have serious consequences. But, Mr. Speaker, we also have a duty to follow the evidence and abandon policies that are failures, that didn't work. And that's exactly what we've done with C5. We are going to put the resources where they need to be to ensure that our society is safer. Honourable Member for Kildonan.
Have a situation where there is a serious criminal who is heavily armed, trafficking drugs, doing it all illegally, and it's because of these Liberals and their soft on crime policies that this man, instead of going to prison, can now serve his sentence from the comfort of his home, Mr. Speaker. That is a serious crime, but no serious time under this Liberal government. So why are they going soft on criminals on one side, letting this guy serve house arrest from the comforts of his home, but attacking honest, trained, tested, and law-abiding hunters and farmers, Mr. Speaker? Why are they doing that? Why are their priorities so misplaced, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I would remind the honourable member and honourable members and Canadians across Canada, Mr. Speaker, that conditional sentence orders are only available where there is no threat to public security. And the person, Mr. Speaker, who is best placed to make that determination, Mr. Speaker, according to the evidence, is the sentencing judge, who has all of the information in front of the bench and makes that determination, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are proud to follow policies that work and abandon policies that don't.
The Honourable Member for Brantford Brant.
Mr. Speaker, once again, criminals are thanking this Liberal government for their soft on crime agenda. This week, a Montreal criminal was convicted of drug trafficking and possession of loaded illegal weapons. Instead of a mandatory minimum sentence in prison, he is serving a sentence in the comfort of his own home. Wow. This government is failing Canadians. Crime is skyrocketing, and instead of dealing with the problem, they want to ban hunting rifles. When will this government stop targeting law-abiding hunters and finally go after the dangerous criminals?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Speaker, and I assure my colleague we are doing precisely that, including with Bill C-21, which will raise maximum sentence against hardened gun traffickers, which will give police additional powers to bust up those networks which would terrorize our communities. We also introduced $450 million over the last 2 years for the CBSA to stop illegal gun smuggling at the border. Mr. Speaker, what did the Conservatives do? They voted against. Mr. Speaker, they've got to walk the talk on this. The Conservatives should reverse their position, and they should support Bill C-21 and all the support we're offering law enforcement on the front lines. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Terrebonne. Mr. Speaker, 10,000 businesses in Quebec and 50,000 in Canada are being cut off after receiving money from the emergency account during the pandemic. Afterwards, Ottawa deemed them ineligible for a forgivable loan of $50,000 and demanded that they pay the funds back. For some businesses, this means bankruptcy, but they don't know why Ottawa considered them ineligible for the loan. They can't appeal the decision or even talk to the government because it's shifting the responsibility for this bad news to the financial institutions. Can the government at least put in place a transparent arbitration process? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, during the pandemic, work was done by our government to help companies to keep the link to workers. And now that programs are over, there's work to be done with respect to the CRA. in terms of verification. As promised, we will do this work. Work is unfolding well, and we also have to recover these funds that are due for our workers who worked hard also during the pandemic, who also paid their taxes, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Laurentides-Laballe. Mr. Speaker, only 57% of the Commissioner of Official Languages recommendations were implemented this year. That's half. But the worst laggard when it comes to the French language isn't Air Canada, it's the federal government itself. And do you know how many recommendations Transport Canada has followed? 0. How many for the Department of Agriculture? 0. And the PM's office? 0 again. How do you expect Quebecers to trust this government to protect French when it boycotts the recommendations of the Commissioner of Official Languages? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are the first government to recognize these rights, and that's why we implemented Bill C-16, which is ambitious, and to make a difference with companies under federal jurisdiction in Quebec and also in regions which have strong Francophone presence outside of Quebec. I think we are looking at these recommendations, and these are very useful. He has to do his job, and that's why we really enhanced his tools, and we are looking forward to the adoption of this bill.
Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
During a Liberal-made inflationary crisis, Canadians are having a hard time choosing between heating their homes and feeding their families. And we found out today that instead of having the backs of Canadians, they're helping Liberal insiders get rich. The Liberal International Trade Minister was caught red-handed and found guilty of breaking ethics laws by giving a sweetheart contract to her friend, the CBC pundit, Amanda Alvaro. Will the minister resign?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Commissioner for his important role in ensuring transparency and accountability in our institutions. And as the report indicates, I take full responsibility for my actions. I should have recused myself, and I apologize for not doing so. At no time was there any intention for anyone to benefit inappropriately. My efforts fell short of my own high personal standard for transparency and accountability, which Canadians have a right to expect from their elected officials. I'm sorry, and it won't happen again. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Selkirk, Interlake Eastman.
Mr. Speaker, if the Trade Minister was truly sorry, she'd pay the money back. In fact, she is the fourth Liberal Cabinet Minister to be found guilty of breaking the law by the Ethics Commissioner. The Trade Minister got caught giving 2 sweetheart deals to her friend who also worked on her campaign. Now, the Ethics Commissioner said there's simply no excuse for contracting with a friend's company. After Bill Marno got caught, he did the honourable thing and resigned. Will the Trade Minister follow suit and resign immediately, or does the Prime Minister have to fire this corrupt minister?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I have taken and I am taking full responsibility for my actions. I should have recused myself, and I'm sincerely sorry for not having done so. What I want Canadians to know is that this will not happen again.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of International Trade said that she's accepting the full responsibility for her actions. What does that mean, accept the full responsibility in this House, Mr. Speaker? It means to do something, not just say that you're sorry, but you also have to assume this responsibility. She abused of her power to give a $20 million contract to her Liberal friends. Is the fourth Liberal minister to be caught by the Commissioner? It's inexcusable to conclude a contract with her friend, and now she can do the only right thing and step down.
The Honourable House Leader.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The minister has already offered an apology. It's obvious there was no personal benefit at stake. The minister only accepted all the recommendations, and she's already answered the question. The Honourable Member for Dorval-Lachine-LaSalle. Mr. Speaker, It's important for Canadians to know that our justice system is fair, accessible, and effective, and that includes the judiciary. Can the Minister of Justice explain why Bill C-9, recently passed unanimously by this House, is an essential step in achieving this goal? Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Justice. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for La Salle-Lachine Dorval. I'm very proud, Mr. Speaker, of the unanimous passage of Bill C-9. It sends a very clear signal. We take our responsibility to the justice system seriously. Our government's proposed amendments to the Judges Act will strengthen the process for dealing with complaints against federally appointed judges. And it will give the Canadian Judicial Council greater authority to deal with complaints, to ensure that the complaints process results in final decisions that are fair and timely at a reasonable cost. We will work with the other place to ensure the adoption.
For Calgary Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, startling Environment Canada reports show that Canadian greenhouse gas emissions have dramatically increased under the Liberals. That's because they failed to build public transit projects that would pull cars off the road. They failed to provide non-emitting sources of electricity to places that really need it. And they've crushed Canadian energy producers who are world leaders in decarbonizing energy production. The carbon tax isn't reducing emissions, but it sure is making Canadians poorer and less energy secure. When will the Liberals cancel it?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as usual, the Conservatives are spreading misinformation, Mr. Speaker. We are on track to meet our targets, which are in 2030, Mr. Speaker. And what did they do when they were in power, Mr. Speaker? Well, they did absolutely nothing for 10 years. They blew up our emissions quotas in the Kyoto Accord. They cut $350 million from the environment and climate change budget. They gutted our environmental laws, Mr. Speaker, and now they're blaming us for their inaction. They have no plan for climate change. They have no plan for the economy, and they certainly have no plan for affordability, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
The Liberals use the term misinformation to try to gaslight anyone who uses facts to counter their narrative, and that's wrong. And there's one inconvenient truth that the Liberals want Canadians to forget when it comes to the fight against climate change, and that's that the only government where Canadian greenhouse gas emissions actually decreased was the last Conservative government. We had a decrease we had a balanced budget. The economy was growing. They have doubled the debt and increased greenhouse gas emissions. When will they cancel the carbon tax?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, in 2004, the Liberal government in Ontario moved to shut down coal-fired powers, and the federal Conservative Party claimed that that was their climate plan. In 2008, the global economy crashed, bringing emissions down with it for a time, and the Conservatives called that a climate plan. This year, the value of Bitcoin failed significantly, and this is an economic...
I'm going to have to... I'm going to have to interrupt. We were kind of doing well, and now it's getting out of hand. I understand everyone's excited about Christmas coming. Try to contain your excitement. And we'll let the Honourable Minister continue from where he left off, please.
As I say, the value of Bitcoin increased significantly and then crashed spectacularly. And for the Conservatives, that's an economic plan. Canadians deserve thoughtful plans to address their very real concern about climate and about the economy, not reckless rhetoric from Conservative politicians.
The Honourable Member for Moose Jaw Lake Centre, Lanigan.
Mr. Speaker, this government loves to tax Canadians. They implement schemes like their ineffective carbon tax, a plan that has done absolutely nothing to lower emissions, while attacking the economic lifeblood of Western Canada. And yet, they expect the good people of Saskatchewan to pay more in ever-rising taxes. Mr. Speaker, this Christmas, will these Liberals finally stop forcing their failed carbon tax on Canadians?
Honourable Minister of Tourism.
The great question of this Christmas season
is when will the Conservatives actually stick up for Canadians by making sure that those who are suffering right now and need the help in the face of global inflation can actually get it. Mr. Speaker, time and time again, the Conservatives have voted against our measures. And Mr. Speaker, of the two visions in this country right now for how to govern, the voters of Mississauga Lakeshore spoke last night, and who did they vote for, Mr. Speaker? A Liberal, and we will have the backs of Canadians through this Christmas and into the new year.
The honourable member for Bonavista Burin Trinity.
Mr. Speaker, the United States and Canada have a strong relationship built on working together to achieve shared goals. Just last week, the Canadian Coast Guard and the United States Coast Guard signed a renewed joint marine pollution contingency plan. Can the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans and Coast Guard inform this House what this important agreement means for protecting water and coast?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member from Bonavista Burin Trinity for his strong advocacy for his constituents and for his question. Canada and the United States do indeed have a strong tradition of cooperating in protecting our waters and minimizing oil spills. But this agreement gives our countries even better and stronger mechanisms and tools to respond to marine spills by working even more closely together. So alongside the U.S., Mr. Speaker, we'll continue to protect the oceans, keep our coasts clean and safe, and this agreement will help do exactly that.
The Honourable Member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Mr. Speaker, people deserve to know that they are safe from gun violence in our communities. C-21 was an opportunity to limit handguns and protect victims of domestic violence. But instead of protecting people, the Liberals made a last-second change unfairly impacting hunters, farmers, and Indigenous people and the tools they use for food security and protection. Concerned constituents in my riding of Nanaimo Ladysmith want to know, when will this government listen and clean up this mess?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
And I assure my colleague that we are indeed listening to Indigenous peoples. Last week, I spent the better part of the morning consulting and engaging with Indigenous leaders right across the country, making sure that we protect Indigenous traditions, including as it relates to food security. Mr. Speaker, we're creating space for Indigenous-led initiatives when it comes to public safety, and we're going to make sure that the language of Bill C-21 aligns with our government's priority, which is to take those guns which were designed for the battlefield off of our streets and protect Indigenous traditions at the same time. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Churchill, Kiewatnik-Askey.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals couldn't be more out of touch with Northern and Indigenous communities. Indigenous leaders at the AFN unanimously opposed the Liberals' amendment to Bill C-21. This amendment is a threat to Indigenous and Northern ways of life. It is a slap in the face for communities that depend on hunting and trapping to live, people that are facing some of the highest costs of living right now. Bill C-21 was meant to be important legislation to deal with handgun violence, but the Liberals have chosen to play cheap political games. Will the Liberals withdraw the amendment, stick to the main bill, and stand up for Northern and Indigenous peoples struggling right now?
The Honourable Minister for Northern Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for that question. We will always respect hunters, sports shooters, and Indigenous peoples and their traditions. Our government has been extremely clear. We are not targeting hunting rifles. We are not targeting shotguns. This is about guns that were used in Polytechnique, Quebec City Mosque attack, and South Simcoe to create safer communities for all Canadians.
That's all the time we have for question period today. C'est tout le temps que nous avons. I wish to draw the attention of members to the presence in the gallery of the Honourable Siobhan Cody, our former colleague and current Deputy Premier and Minister of Finance for the province of Newfoundland and Labrador.